My son stopped speaking to me 11 years ago because I wouldn't give him $80,000. 3 days after the Western Canada Lottery Corporation published my name as the winner of a $22 million Lotto Max jackpot, he arrived at my front door in Calgary with his wife, 2 overstuffed suitcases, and his in-laws parked at the curb. He said, "Dad, we're here. You shouldn't have to face something like this alone." I looked at his face, the one I'd raised, the one I'd driven to hockey practice at 5 in the morning for 8 straight winters, and I said, "Come in," not because I had forgiven him, because I was ready. Let me go back to the beginning. I worked for the city of Calgary for 38 years as a municipal infrastructure inspector. Roads, bridges, drainage systems, water mains. You learn to look for cracks. You learn that what fails first is rarely what you are watching. It's always something deeper, some hidden fault that's been there all along, holding only out of habit. After I retired, I bought a modest bungalow in Varsity, lived quietly, walked the Bow River pathway most mornings. My pension was modest. My RRSP was sound. I drove a 2017 Silverado and didn't apologize for it. The lottery ticket was an accident. I'd stopped at a Petro-Canada on Crowchild Trail to fill up, went inside for a coffee, and bought a Lotto Max quick pick out of no particular habit. I'd done it maybe 4 times in my life before. That was a Tuesday in March. By Friday, my phone was ringing from a number I didn't recognize. And by Saturday, I was sitting across from 2 Western Canada Lottery Corporation representatives in a downtown office, while they slid paperwork across the table. $22 million Canadian, tax-free. That part matters. In Canada, lottery winnings aren't taxed as income. Every dollar was mine. I sat in that chair, same posture I'd held through 38 years of infrastructure reviews, same hands folded, and I told them I'd need a few days before any media announcement. They said that wasn't possible. Alberta regulations require public disclosure. My name, my photograph, that enormous novelty check. I'd be on the news whether I liked it or not. I wasn't afraid. I'd spent my career anticipating what breaks under pressure. I started planning. The press conference happened on a Thursday morning. A photographer kept asking me to hold the check higher. A reporter from Global News asked if I had family to celebrate with. I said I had good neighbors and a reliable truck. She laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. That evening I drove to RBC and asked for a private appointment. The senior financial advisor who met me was thorough and efficient. We discussed investment accounts, GCs, and when I mentioned that I had an adult son from whom I'd been estranged for over a decade, she said quietly, "You may want to speak to an estate lawyer before anything else." I told her I already had a name written in the small notebook I carry in my jacket pocket. 2 weeks later, I moved into a house I'd purchased in Tuscany in the northwest part of the city. Newer build, 4 bedrooms, triple garage backing onto a greenbelt. I paid cash. The realtor told me I was her easiest client in 20 years. I moved in with my tools, my workbench, my books, my 12-year-old Shepherd Cross biscuit, and a chest of drawers that had belonged to my father. The house felt large. Some evenings I stood at the kitchen window looking out at the greenbelt and tried to locate the version of myself that had imagined this differently. Sunday dinners, maybe a grandchild biscuit getting patted by small hands. That version of things had been over for a long time. Here's what happened 11 years ago. My son was 29. He'd gotten married the previous summer and called me one evening to say he had a business idea, a restaurant concept, wood-fired, farm-to-table. He'd found a space on 17th Avenue. He needed $80,000. He said it the way he used to ask for rides to the rink. Just his dad. Just a number. I had $23,000 in a non-registered savings account. It was everything I had outside my pension and my locked-in RRSP. I told him I could give him $20,000, all of it, whatever I had. He went quiet. Then he said something I have replayed many times since. He said, $20,000, that's what I'm worth to you. I didn't know what everything he meant. I'd paid for his hockey, his university tuition, a used car at 17, a security deposit when he first moved out. What I hadn't done, apparently, was accumulate enough money to satisfy him. Then his wife's voice came on the line. She'd been beside him, listening the whole time, and she said that maybe I should look at a second mortgage if I was serious about supporting my son's future. That maybe a real father would find a way. My son didn't correct her. I said I wouldn't take a second mortgage on a business venture, and that the $20,000 was real and genuine and all I had. He said, "Then I guess we know where things stand." He hung up. I waited a week for him to call back. Then a month. Then Christmas came and no card arrived. The following year passed the same way, and the next, and the one after that. 11 years. Now here is what I understood, standing at my front door the day he arrived. 38 years inspecting infrastructure had taught me that a crack doesn't announce itself. You find it by getting close, by running your hand along the surface. If I'd sent him away at the door that day, I'd have gotten nothing. No evidence, no understanding, no opportunity to see the full scope of what I was dealing with. I let him in for the same reason I used to descend into drainage culverts with a flashlight. You don't understand the damage from the street. You have to go in. We were worried about you, my son said, settling into my kitchen chair like it was always his. His wife stood by the counter, eyes moving slowly across the appliances, the layout, the square footage. A man your age suddenly dealing with this kind of money, it's a lot. I said I'd managed infrastructure budgets in the tens of millions for 3 decades, and that I understood numbers reasonably well. He smiled, she smiled. Her father, who had followed them inside without being invited, nodded as though I'd said something charming. By evening they had claimed the 2 largest guest rooms. Her parents were in the 3rd. My son had already located the fuse panel and asked whether the hot tub on the back deck was operational. His wife opened 3 kitchen cupboards and said, "You need more storage. We should probably rethink the layout." No question attached, just a statement. Her mother rearranged the pantry that same evening while I was in the study with the door closed. I photographed everything with my phone, not out of sentiment. My son presented me with a printed document later that week. He'd titled it Family Asset Management Framework. 8 pages of loosely formatted suggestions about a family trust, a monthly household stipend, and something called collaborative decision-making protocols. I read every page. I told him I'd consider it. He took that as progress. The following morning I was in Ms. Dub's office on 8th Avenue by 10 o'clock. She was efficient and precise, and when I explained the situation, lottery winnings, estranged adult son 72-hour arrival, she nodded once, the slow deliberate nod of someone confirming a hypothesis. Under Alberta's Wills and Succession Act, she said, an adult child may make a maintenance claim against your estate only if they were financially dependent on you at the time of death. Your son is married, self-employed, and has been estranged for 11 years. He has no credible claim. She paused. That said, he can make noise, and noise costs time and money. Let's make certain he has nothing to stand on. We drafted a will before noon. My estate would go to 2 organizations. The Calgary Drop-In Center, which provides shelter and supports people experiencing homelessness, and the Cochrane Humane Society, which had cared for Biscuit before I adopted him. My son was named explicitly and explicitly excluded, with language Ms. Dube said would make any contest nearly impossible to sustain. The document was notarized and filed. I drove home with the particular clarity that comes at the end of a long structural assessment. Everything documented, load paths identified, no ambiguity left. That afternoon I made a second call. A man named Mr. Osei, a former RCMP investigator now working as a private consultant. We met at a Tim Hortons on Sarcee Trail. He had a notepad in a plain manner and asked very good questions. I told him what I needed, employment status, debt load, the real reason they'd come. He said he'd have a report in 10 days. While I waited, the house rearranged itself around their presence. My son relocated my workbench tools to the garage corner to make space for a treadmill he was apparently planning to order. His wife replaced the kitchen dish towels with ones she'd brought from their car, apparently finding mine inadequate. Her father watched television in the living room, at a volume that made reading difficult. Her mother moved things without asking, and then couldn't remember where she'd moved them. My son came to me one evening while I was reading and presented a second, revised version of his asset management framework, this time accompanied by a cover letter from a law firm in Beltline. It referenced Alberta's adult interdependent partner legislation, misapplied, irrelevant, and suggested I establish a power of attorney immediately. His wife stood in the doorway behind him. Her father sat in the living room. "You're not getting any younger," my son said. "We're here to help, but we need access to actually do that." I said I'd have my lawyer review the documents. His jaw tightened. He said, "That's not really the answer we were hoping for." That night I heard him through the kitchen floor vent. "He's stalling. If he hasn't moved in 2 weeks, we talk to Patterson again." Patterson, I gathered, was the lawyer who'd written the cover letter. I emailed Ms. Dube the recording the next morning. Her response came within the hour. "Keep collecting, the more the better." Mr. Osei's report arrived on a Thursday. We met at the same Tim Hortons. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside, credit card statements across 4 accounts, total balance $67,000. A line of credit at $28,000, payments 4 months behind. Their condo in Inglewood, purchased in 2021, carried a mortgage that, according to public registry data, had been in arrears since November. Her parents had co-signed a personal loan that was also past due. A letter from a collections agency, dated 6 weeks before my lottery win went public, had been sent to their shared Inglewood address. They hadn't come because they missed me. They'd come because the Western Canada Lottery Corporation had handed them a map straight to my door, and they had nowhere else to go. I drove home through the early dark. Biscuit met me at the entrance. I sat on the back step with him for a while and looked at the greenbelt and let what I knew settle into the same place where I'd always kept structural findings, clear, documented, filed. That evening, my son came to me with his hands clasped, affecting gravity. He said they had some unexpected financial pressures and asked whether I could advance them $15,000. Just temporarily, just to stabilize things. I said I'd think on that. He thought I was softening. He was wrong about what I was thinking. 3 weeks later, I told them at dinner that my estate lawyer had suggested charitable engagement was important for demonstrating intentional giving. I said I'd been moved by their involvement and was considering adjusting the will. That if they could show sustained commitment over 6 months, I was prepared to include them as secondary beneficiaries. My son looked at his wife. Something confirmed between them, wordlessly, and he said, "Dad, that means everything to us." I volunteered 3 days a week. Tuesdays at the drop-in center, Thursdays at the Cochrane Humane Society. I began bringing my son and daughter-in-law along. The volunteer coordinator at the drop-in center was a man named Harvey, 9 years running programs there, steady and observant. He showed them the meal service, the clothing sort, the intake process. My son spent the first hour on his phone near the entrance. My daughter-in-law declined to help with clothing sorting without gloves, was given gloves, folded 2 shirts, and said she needed fresh air. At the Humane Society, my daughter-in-law stood at a distance from the dog runs with her arms crossed. My son spent 40 minutes in a corner talking on his phone about something that wasn't Cochrane. The coordinator there later asked me carefully whether they were doing all right. Driving them home one Thursday evening, I heard my son say to his wife, he'd forgotten I was in the front seat, 6 months of this. We do the shelter and the dog place for 6 months and we're set. It's not complicated, she said, just don't push him. He's lonely and he wants to believe it's real. We just have to let him. I noted the date and time in my small notebook when we got home. The Calgary Humanitarian Awards Gala was held in late February at the Palliser Hotel on 9th Avenue, a building I'd walked past 5,000 times in my working years. The drop-in center had been nominated for a Community Impact Award, and Harvey had asked if I'd speak given my recent contribution to their capital campaign. I said I'd be glad to. I told my son and daughter-in-law it was a significant moment for the legacy I was building. I said it would mean a great deal to have family present. My son said we wouldn't miss it. In the 2 weeks before the gala, I met with Harvey, with Ms. Doob, and with the event's AV coordinator. I had the recordings cleaned of background noise. I prepared a timeline document, dates, interactions, 11 years of silence, the 72-hour arrival after the lottery announcement, the debt records Mr. Osi had compiled. The AV coordinator tested audio levels twice in the empty ballroom. Harvey, when I explained what I intended, was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "They'll try to make you look like the villain." I said, "Truth is an absolute defense." The night of the gala, 240 people filled that room. City councilors, business owners, social workers, community organizers, retired teachers. A global news camera stood at the back. My son wore a jacket he'd borrowed from somewhere. His wife wore a dress. Her parents had stayed at the house. I was introduced after dinner. I walked to the podium, thanked Harvey and the drop-in center, and spoke for a few minutes about what it means to give without condition. Then I said, "I want to tell you something about my family." My son looked up from the table. I pressed the remote. His voice filled the Palliser ballroom, clear and unmistakable through the speakers. 6 months of this. We do the shelter and the dog place for 6 months and we're set. It's not complicated. Then his wife, "Just don't push him. He's lonely and he wants to believe it's real." Then the kitchen vent recording. "If he hasn't moved in 2 weeks, we talk to Patterson again." The room went very still. My son pushed back his chair, his wife gripped the table edge. I spoke without raising my voice. 11 years ago, I offered my son $20,000, every dollar I had saved, when he needed help building his future. He told me it wasn't enough, called the offer insulting, and didn't speak to me again. When I won the lottery last spring, he arrived within 72 hours. These recordings tell you why. I looked at him directly. The organizations in this room know what genuine need looks like. My son presented a different kind of need. You've just heard it in his own words. A security guard, off-duty RCMP, Harvey had arranged it, stepped to my son's elbow, not forceful, just present. My son stood motionless for a moment, jaw tight, face white, then sat back down. His wife stared at the tablecloth. The applause started at the back of the room and moved forward. An older woman at the next table reached across and touched my hand once. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. My son and daughter-in-law left before dessert was served. I stayed until the end. Ms. Doob called the following Monday. They'd retained the Beltline firm and filed a defamation claim, $200,000 in alleged damages. She said it would be dismissed within 2 months. It was dismissed in 6 weeks, at a pretrial conference, after the judge reviewed the recordings and noted that the plaintiff's own statements were inconsistent with the emotional harm they claimed to have suffered. We filed for costs. 70% awarded. I changed the locks the morning after the gala. Their belongings were boxed and left in the garage. I texted my son the padlock combination. He replied with one sentence, "You'll regret this. I've read message many times since. I haven't found the regret yet." Mr. Osi checked in periodically over the months that followed. Their Inglewood condo sold under power of sale in April. They moved to a rental in Airdrie. Her parents went back east. By summer, my son and daughter-in-law had separated. A neighbor in their building had apparently called the police twice for disturbances. I felt none of what I'd expected to feel about any of this. Not satisfaction, not sorrow. Something closer to the feeling at the end of a long structural report. The recognition that you've documented everything accurately, that the findings are honest, and that your job was to tell the truth about what was there. The letter came in September. A plain envelope, my son's handwriting, postmarked Airdrie. I sat on the back step with it while Biscuit leaned against my knee and the greenbelt went amber in the afternoon light. He wrote that he wasn't going to ask for forgiveness, that he knew I'd let them in because I was already prepared, not because I trusted him, and that he understood that was the correct reading. He wrote that he remembered the hockey drives at 5 in the morning. He remembered the $20,000 I'd offered and what he'd said when I offered it. He wrote that he'd thought about that conversation more than I probably knew. He wrote that he wasn't asking for anything. He just wanted me to know he understood what he'd done, both times. I read it 3 times, then I folded it and put it in the chest of drawers that had belonged to my father. Some things deserve to be kept rather than answered. Harvey called that week about a volunteer appreciation dinner at the drop-in center. My neighbor Morris, a retired teacher 2 doors down who'd started waving at me every morning, and graduated to inviting me for Thursday evening cards with a small group from the neighborhood, asked if I was coming this week. The coordinator at the Cochrane Humane Society wanted to know if I'd help plan the spring adoption event. Small things, chosen things. One evening in October, I sat on the back step as the light went flat and gray the way it does in an Alberta autumn, Biscuit's head heavy on my boot, the greenbelt gone to gold and stillness. I thought about 38 years of reading structures, of finding the load-bearing points, of writing honest reports about what holds and what doesn't. I thought about the difference between what breaks because it was badly built and what breaks because someone kept adding weight it was never designed to carry. I'd spent my whole career looking for that difference. I was still looking for it. I just knew now, with more certainty than I once had, exactly where the solid ground was, and who had been standing on it all along.